It's easy to feel powerless against the human-induced threats to our air, water and earth. But doing nothing isn't an option. From fighting pollution to curbing global warming, even seemingly small steps can pack a punch. Hello and welcome to Eco India. I'm Sanuta Raghu. Cigarettes pose a big risk to human health. Their impact on the environment is less well known. So consider this. Trillions of toxic cigarette butts are tossed out every year, and most don't land in the trash. Initiatives here in India aim to tackle the problem at its source and are converting these tiny stubs into sustainable, practical products.
This clay is no ordinary clay. It has been mixed with treated waste from cigarette butts. Girraj Prasad has been a potter all his life, but this material is something new for him.
इस मटेरियल से ना एक तो क्या है हमारे जो भी प्रोडक्ट
This material, when mixed with clay, increases the porosity. So when we sow something in this planter, it gets a good amount of air.
मिट्टी के द्वारा तो वो इसमें बहुत ज़्यादा पारदर्शी है.
The idea to make products like planters, ashtrays and lanterns come from a small group of students from Delhi University's Sri Ram College of Commerce. Their initiative, Project Leher, tackles the problem of cigarette butt waste.
We came across this shocking fact that a single cigarette can potentially pollute 500 liters of water in a go. And that's when we realized that something that we consider to be very, very negligible can out there wreak such havoc on the environment.
According to the United Nations Environment Programme, cigarette butts are the most common form of plastic pollution. About 100 billion cigarette butts get dumped in India's landfills every year. In 2021, environmental activist Nirit Datta started an India-wide campaign called Butt Rush, motivating volunteers to collect thrown-away cigarette butts. The Vrikshit Foundation responded to the call. The aim of the Delhi-based not-for-profit NGO is to make India's capital cleaner and healthier.
So this will be our 479th drive where we are collecting the cigarette butts. When you ask people now that what is the most common pollutant in form of plastic, generally people answer it's plastic straw or a plastic bottle. But the truth is far behind this. The truth is cigarette butts are the most common pollutant in form of plastic.
Each cigarette butt is made of cellulite acetate, a non-biodegradable plastic filter that takes almost 10 years to completely decompose. When the waste disintegrates into microplastics, it is consumed by marine animals. Tobacco product waste also contains over 7,000 toxic chemicals. A study conducted by the San Diego State University revealed that one smoked cigarette butt in 1 liter of water is enough to kill both marine and freshwater fish. And the butts are also dangerous for life on land.
When someone
throws that cigarette butt directly into the park or into the pot or anywhere, what happens? It mixes with the land and causes a problem. The soil is affected and seeds don't germinate properly. It takes more time and plant growth is affected.
The more than 1,000 volunteers have collected well over 500,000 cigarette butts. Sometimes they send the garbage back to tobacco industry with the note, "Your butt, your responsibility." The majority, however, are sent to a waste disposal company. Hardly any cigarette butts are recycled.
Only 1 to 2%. So about 98% of waste gets decomposed, affecting the land.
Back to Delhi University students and Project Leher. It is one of the few organizations that have been trying to formalize the process of collection and recycling of cigarette butt waste. The effort is still small scale. They receive cigarette waste from the different parties involved in the Butt Rush project. They are also working with about 15 rag pickers, paying them about half a euro cent for every kilogram of collected butt waste. At the Sri Ram Institute of Industrial Research in Delhi, it gets recycled professionally. Eco-activists meet scientists in a common cause of dealing properly with cigarette waste. The butts are being analyzed for toxins and then they are crushed. A facility of gamma radiation detoxifies the waste and neutralizes the smell, a process that is also used for the sterilization of medical devices. The processed waste then finds its way back into the economy through the potter's colony. The student-led project Leher currently engages 20 potters who use the treated cigarette butts. They earn about 150 euros a month, around 12,000 rupees, by selling pots made from this clay.
We have to ensure that the potters that we make the products from have to have a certain income as well. So we ensure that they get around 25 to 30% of the income, and we have various supply chains and value chains in which we sell our products.
Giraj Prasad has been working with the project for the last 7 months.
It is possible that the planter that I am making for them is best for our health and the environment. Fueled by this thought, I have joined hands with them.
Clay mixed with a clean new material made of cigarette butts. Giraj Prasad is pleased that through the traditional art of pottery making, he is helping solve the plastic waste problem.
Burning cigarette butts are, of course, also a major fire hazard. In the mountains of northeastern India, villagers help protect their forests against the frequent threat of wildfires by collecting highly flammable pine needles. And they found an innovative and environmentally friendly way to put them to use.
This is a well-rehearsed cleanup operation for Anshul Pathania. Together with other women, she combs through the forests of Hamirpur for pine needles, a job that takes months to complete. From the dry season in March through to July when the monsoons start to descend. Every day, they collect almost 2 tons of pine needles.
We don't pick the green leaves. We only collect the dried ones on the ground. It's these dried pine needles that are flammable,
which can have devastating consequences. Sustained dry periods and intense heat can easily spark forest fires. In 2018 alone, the region lost an area equivalent to 35,000 football pitches. There are forest guards on patrol, and while they can alert local residents to impending danger, they are powerless against the flames themselves.
In the Hamirpur block, there are mostly jungles of chir trees and lots of pine needles. So this area has a maximum number of fires.
The frequent fires destroy the local ecosystem, while also causing huge damage to local farmers. Sanjay Kumar and his family have already suffered substantial losses over the years.
If the forest catches fire, grazing lands for the cattle get destroyed. In turn, the cattle are unable to produce milk. Our households then struggle because we earn money by selling milk. We need to purchase grass from outside, which is expensive. We are simple villagers and we are poor. We can't afford to buy it.
This subtropical area of the Himalayas didn't used to have these many pine trees. They were planted by the British colonial authorities in order to provide fresh timber for building their railways. The species has since come to dominate the local landscape. Today, the wood is used for heating and in construction. As forest fires became a growing problem, Aarti Kashyap and her fellow scientists from the Indian Institute of Technology, Mandi, wanted to find a solution for the masses of highly flammable needles in the pine forests. They came up with an innovative idea. Once collected, the needles are processed and mixed with sawdust and wood chips to create eco-pellets for heating. In addition to burning longer, they emit less CO2 and methane compared to coal.
We just thought of that, let's try different particle size. So we chopped them manually. Actually, we hired local villagers, labor, and we chopped them of various sizes, half, various sizes. Once we chopped them to a reasonable level and we put them in machine with 100% pine, we had a very nice, neat, beautiful briquette.
The scientist has patented the method, but local companies are free to make their own briquettes and pellets. And 4 years ago, the government began providing subsidies for new production facilities.
They don't come cheap, together with the machinery costing 7 lakh or close to 8,000 euros. That can be a daunting investment here. Despite the subsidy offer, only 25 local entrepreneurs have so far joined the scheme. Among them is Rajneesh Kamar. He's been in the briquette business for almost 2 years now.
On the basis of 300 working days, we can produce 3,000 metric ton of the briquettes. The biomass briquettes we are manufacturing has a great demand, especially in the tribal areas where there are no plants. And as such, in the past, more of the trees were cut to cater the need of the fuel in those areas.
Farmer Sanjay Kumar was one of the first to start collecting and converting pine needles into fuel pellets. And he's never regretted investing in his little processing plant. In a good month, the venture earns him around 1 lakh or 1,100 euros.
My family benefits from selling briquettes. Like other families, I found a source of income. We collect the pine needles from the forest and make them into briquettes and use the money earned to cover our household expenses.
The project has already created around 200 jobs. Anshul Pathania has been gathering needles for over a year now, in the process improving her personal situation.
We found work collecting pine needles, which has allowed us to be independent. Women used to have to travel long distances for a job, but it's good that we've now found work near our homes. Instead of it taking up the whole day, we can just come, work for some time, and then finish our household chores.
For residents of the Hamirpur area and for the forest guards, the project has had a range of benefits.
Cattle and other animals also now have more grasslands to graze on that used to burn down through fires. The chances of fire have been reduced too. Our properties are safe. If we make this program regular in the future, we'll be able to have greater control over the fires.
The idea now is for the project to be adopted elsewhere in the region too. A simple but effective concept for creating fuel while preventing forest fires.
Methane is a destructive greenhouse gas that in the short term is far more powerful at warming the planet than carbon dioxide. Methane emissions often escape from fossil fuel facilities. It's a danger that's invisible to the naked eye. But as our reporter discovered, there's a simple way to avert it.
You're looking at the biggest climate catastrophe that nobody's talking about.
So like all of this here,
Yeah.
all of this here is methane.
Methane. A powerful gas silently baking the planet. It's responsible for more than a quarter of global warming since the Industrial Revolution. And it's pouring out of fossil fuel facilities for no good reason.
We're talking about plumbing, literally.
That's right. Cutting methane emissions is one of the cheapest, fastest, and easiest ways to slow climate change. But the companies responsible aren't doing it. And, with a few exceptions, nobody's even holding them accountable. Let's meet James Torito from the Clean Air Task Force, an environmental group pushing for tech and policy solutions to keep the planet from heating. It lobbies governments to capture carbon, cut pollution, and build nuclear power plants. We're meeting Torito in Berlin and taking the train down to northern Italy to search for methane where it shouldn't be. Torito's job is to cross the continent tracking down fugitive methane emissions escaping fossil fuel facilities.
Methane is a gas that absolutely wrecks the climate. Unlike CO2, it doesn't last long in the atmosphere before breaking down, but it's way stronger in the short term.
It's so strong, in fact, that over a 20-year period, methane heats the planet more than 80 times more than CO2. Methane concentrations are rising, fast. Across the world, enormous quantities are pouring out of farms, landfills, and fossil fuel infrastructure. The source you might already be familiar with is cattle. Cows have 4 stomachs that digest food in a way that fills their burps with methane. Quick side note, it's a myth that cow farts are the problem here. Only a small amount comes out the back. Rice paddies are another big source of the methane emissions from agriculture. Together with sheep and some other foods, sources like this make up 40% of human-caused methane emissions. Then there's landfills, responsible for about 20% of the problem. When bacteria break down organic waste without oxygen, they also produce methane. But the source we're interested in is the easiest to fix: fossil fuels. They're responsible for 1/3 of humanity's methane emissions. The gas we burn for cooking and heating is almost entirely made up from methane. But it's leaking everywhere. Offshore rigs, oil wells, gas pipelines, and also the facilities we're about to visit. We're driving to an industrial park on the outskirts of Milan where fossil gas is stored. Facilities like this are a vital part of the energy supply chain that nobody really pays attention to.
We've come here to see pollution that you can't see with the naked eye. You could be living right next to a methane leak and have absolutely no idea it's happening.
Fossil fuel companies generally aren't too thrilled about people calling them out for polluting. So when Torito turns up at a site like this, he stays outside the security fence and scans the area with a special camera to search for methane. And here comes the big question. Will we spot fugitive methane emissions escaping from the facility?
Okay. Yeah, so what you're seeing is gas coming out of the vent stack.
This is at the core of what methane hunters do, making the invisible visible.
So I literally can't see anything on my phone.
Yeah.
And here we can see a gigantic leak of a gas pouring out of the top of that pipe.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a reason my camera can't pick up these emissions. My phone cost a few €100, whereas Torito's camera costs
100,000 euros.
100,000 euros.
The price tag is so high because the camera picks up infrared radiation at the wavelength needed to see hydrocarbons like methane. And although it can't measure how much is leaking out, the camera does show where the problems are.
It can see invisible gases. It can detect things that I, as a normal person, am not able to detect. That is mind-blowing. But also it does kind of explain why this is such a kind of, why this whole industry is getting away with all these methane emissions, right? People do not have any idea just how much is leaking out and where it's coming from.
The International Energy Agency estimates the world's methane emissions from the power sector are about 70% higher than countries are reporting in their official data. There are basically 3 ways methane gets released. There are simple leaks, which could be because a screw hasn't been tightened or a piece of equipment is rusty. Then there's venting, where methane is intentionally let out. This might be done to reduce pressure in a pipe during maintenance work, for instance. The third is flaring, where methane coming out of the vent is burned. Burning methane turns it from a super harmful gas to, well, just a regular harmful one. But often it's done so poorly that raw methane is still escaping into the atmosphere. In 2021, the Clean Air Task Force visited 250 oil and gas sites across Europe. It documented methane emissions from a variety of sources at 180 of them. These aren't just isolated incidents. Many pieces of equipment were leaking methane when Torito visited 8 months previously. Some seem to have stopped. Others are even pumping out more gas than last time.
Yeah. So some of these sources can certainly be fixed pretty easily. We were looking at a valve. We were just looking at a valve that looked like it, really could just be tightened.
Yeah.
Other stuff might, fixing them, repairing them might be a little more complex to understand where the emissions are coming from.
We asked the facility operator Snam about the leaks we saw, but they didn't respond to a request for comment. But site operators aren't the only ones responsible. Methane is leaking across the entire supply chain. Before it gets to European storage tanks, it needs to be extracted from the ground and shipped or piped vast distances. The infrared sensors in satellites hundreds of kilometers above our heads are helping scientists spot methane leaking out from under our noses. And they're terrified by what they're finding.
In the field, we can see all these leaky, defective little materials, or a tank leaking more than it should, or things like that. But you don't see the key players.
This is Toma Lovo, a scientist who uses satellites to identify so-called ultra-emitters of methane. Satellites aren't perfect. They struggle to see methane at night, through clouds, or above water. But on land, they're picking up emissions that are on a whole other level. Lovot's study found about 10% of the industry's methane emissions come from these gigantic releases. They happen rarely, but they're happening all over the world. Ultra-emitting events come from equipment failing or companies clearing methane out of pipes to do maintenance work on them.
And so that giant burst of methane is worth 1,000 leaks.
And this comes at a heavy price. Lost revenue from wasting gas, lost lives from air pollution, and lost time in the fight against climate change. The study found that 4 countries, Turkmenistan, Russia, the US, and Iran, could save billions of dollars by fixing just these ultra-emitting events. And here's the big lesson I've learned so far. Fixing the industry's methane problem is ludicrously cheap. Fossil fuel companies could cut methane emissions by a staggering 75% using technologies that already exist.
In some cases, it's as easy as tightening a bolt or closing a valve.
Some leaks are still bound to happen when equipment wears down or workers make mistakes. But what companies can choose to do is find and plug them quickly.
How do you deal with the kind of methane coming out of vents and flares and stuff that haven't been lit?
There need to be more regulations and closer inspections of what facilities are intentionally venting. It's pretty simple solutions in many cases.
More than 40% of the IEA's suggested emissions cuts literally wouldn't cost anything. Things are changing.
Methane a landmark agreement to reduce methane emissions.
At the COP26 Climate Summit, leaders from more than 100 countries pledged to slash global methane emissions by 30% by the end of the decade. The European Union plans to introduce new requirements for measuring and reporting methane emissions, as well as spotting and plugging leaks. It's even proposed a ban on venting and flaring. What it hasn't yet considered, though, is setting a standard for the oil and gas it buys elsewhere. Enforcing import standards that cover the whole supply chain could drive changes in countries with leakier facilities. That could spur the changes needed to cut methane emissions globally, and buy the extra time needed to stop temperatures rising.
Tree planting is also touted as a way to help stop temperatures rising, because trees have the potential to suck excess carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. An Indian company uses drones to beef up barren woodlands and create brand new forests, planting seeds of hope even in areas that are hard to reach.
Hovering above the forests of India is Seedcopter. Its mission, to plant trees from the sky. The UAV, an unmanned aerial vehicle, or drone, selectively spreads seed balls over surfaces to plant new forests or strengthen weak ones.
India is a very varied geography and terrain, like deserts in Rajasthan, the tarais in Uttarakhand, or mangroves in West Bengal. So there are many regions where people are unable to reach. So there are not many activities that are going on at present. Seedcopter can reach these areas, unreachable areas, with ease.
Marut Drones, the company behind Seedcopter, aims to plant 1 billion trees by 2030. The drone has already spread seeds in regions like Telangana and Rajasthan. One drone can hold 10 kilos of seed balls, each containing 4,000 to 5,000 seeds, and cover more than 10 hectares each day. Seedlings are monitored from the sky, and results are collected in a database.
So once the imagery is taken, we run some specific algorithms which can process this imagery to create optimum understand optimum environmental parameters for maximum plant growth.
Planting trees is key in the fight against climate change. But getting from seed to tree that can sequester carbon dioxide can take up to 40 years. Some experts feel that projects like Seedcopter are not always helpful.
These can sometimes end up having the unintended impact of being a distraction from much more important conversations about decarbonization.
Marut Drones is working with state governments in India. Despite criticism, they believe in the project.
If you look at the carbon emissions over the years, it has grown exponentially over the last decade, and I think it will grow the same way in the near future. So there needs to be a technology which can which can handle it at the scale. So I think UAV aerial seeding is the way to make it happen.
For now, Seedcopter will keep planting trees. Supporters hope it will help save existing forests and strengthen biodiversity.
In all our stories today, we saw how everyday objects can be reimagined to serve the environment that we live in. Every small action takes us towards a planet where we can continue to thrive for generations. I'll leave you with that and see you again next week. Goodbye and thanks for watching.